Good morning. It's 10 a.m. This is Coffee and Conversations. I showed up early. I thought I was going to show up late, and now I'm early. I'm glad you're here. It is Tuesday. It is 10 a.m., and we are back. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to the YouTube channel, so that way you know when we're going live, that type of thing. If we post videos, you get to see it. Promoting stuff feels weird sometimes. Good morning, Karen. Glad you're here with us. Wonder where Jill is. She's back, and she's back on our time zone. So, I hope she'll be here, and whoever else is here with us. One benefit to liking and subscribing is when we do post things, you'll get to know about it. And one thing we're going to post later on this week is Shannon's new song, He Is Able, that she led us in singing this past Sunday after the message at church. And it is such a fantastic song. Friends, I hope that you will listen to it and worship the Lord through it. And when it becomes available to listen to on streaming services or whatnot, we will let you know. But it is such a huge blessing to us to have someone who's capable of writing such fantastic music. And so I hope that you'll listen to it. I hope you'll share it with your friends, and I hope you'll put it on repeat. So we will share it with you once it is made available. So, don't forget Q&A at the end. If you want to ask a question, throw it in the chat, and I will endeavor to answer them. This morning, we're going to be in Acts chapter 20, verses 7 to 16, where we look at one, maybe not the longest sermon ever, but it is an extended sermon. And friends, you think we go long sometimes. We pale in comparison to what happens in this one. And this is a warning of do not fall asleep in church. You should not fall asleep in church. And if there's any truth to it, it's in this passage. Don't sit in the window and don't fall asleep in church. So let's jump into Acts. That is not where I want that to be. I want that to be there. If I'm there, the duck is blocking me. Call me Affleck. Okay, no more squirreling. So this is in Acts, and Paul is in. He's in Troas. And it's the first day of the week. So that's Sunday. The Apostle Paul is gathered with the believers. And once things in Acts start to shift, they move away from doing things on the Sabbath, and they start doing things on Sunday. You see this early on in the book of Acts where it says on the Lord's Day. They make this transition from Sabbath worship to Sunday worship, from Sabbath to the Lord's Day, and they begin to worship. And this is actually an indication of the radicalness of which they embraced the message of the gospel and the truth of the resurrection. It was a tremendous, radical shift to go from something that they had done their entire lives, these Jewish boys who were taught to observe the Sabbath, not do any work, not even cook on the Sabbath. They could barely do anything, and they shift from synagogue worship on Saturday, on the Sabbath, to gathering with believers on Sunday. It shows the radical nature that the resurrection brought for them. It's not, we really don't, because we didn't grow up in it, we weren't steeped in it, we kind of lose sight of that sometimes, but this is a radical shift for them. These Christians, as they shift from a synagogue structured rhythm of religious practice to a Christian church-centered religious rhythm, and it's centered around the day that the Lord rose from the dead. So Sabbath worship has gone away, and they begin to worship on Sunday. So it's the first day of the week, Sunday, and there's that pointing to Luke being with them as he writes the book of Acts. We were gathered together to break bread. So breaking bread could be a reference to the Lord's Supper, or it could just be a shared meal, or it could be both. So it's not necessarily specific to what they're doing, but they are fellowshipping together. They are probably observing the Lord's Supper. They're probably remembering Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection in their gathering through the sharing of food, through the breaking of the bread and the sharing of the cup. And just like we do every week at Valley View, we remember the Lord's death by observing communion, by taking of bread, which is representative of his broken body, and the drinking of juice, which is representative of his blood. And so the Apostle Paul and the church, the believers who are with him, they do this thing and they break bread. And Paul talked with them, intending to depart the next day. So he's saying he's going to speak with them. He's going to share with them. And he's going to go on for a really long time. But when you think of why that would occur, it makes sense. Paul is passing through, and he doesn't have modern communication. He doesn't have the ability to send an email, to send a text, to make a phone call, to do a FaceTime, to send something on WhatsApp. He doesn't even have the telegraph. He doesn't have the modern postal system. He doesn't have paper to type and write on. He doesn't have any of those things. So to communicate with them is a great deal of effort, unlike for us. Like we take for granted the ability by which we can communicate with others. Think about the fact that over the past 2 years, we had Brendan Stamper in South Africa communicating regularly with us about things that were happening in his ministry while he was there. Not just like one letter occasionally. He was sending things on a regular basis to update us. We have the benefit of being able to communicate at speeds at which humanity has not experienced until the modern world. And so Paul is going to take his opportunity to be with the church and share with them and speak to them. And he goes on for a long time. Till midnight, friends. All right. This coming Sunday, I'm preaching till midnight. You all better bring your food, and we're going to have a grand old time, and we're going to go for hours upon hours upon hours. We think, oh, hey, that's a long time. He goes on till midnight. We don't know when he starts, but it probably would have started in maybe in the evening, like when people could begin to gather, because there wasn't necessarily this like Sunday off thing yet. And so the church would gather to share a meal, and they would begin to hear from Paul. And he goes on until midnight, the middle of the night. Paul is preaching, and they are all there listening. And there were many lamps in the upper room where they were gathered. So they have light, but it's not bright. It's kind of dim. It's like an oil lamp, and it produces a little bit of light, but then it would also produce some carbon monoxide. So you might get a little sleepy, and it's dark. You're tired. You've worked all day. There's this poor young man named Eutychus. I think I said that correctly. Sitting in the window because he wants some fresh air. Maybe it's hot. He's dozing. He's doing one of these. And none of you have ever done that in church, and I've never done that ever in a church setting or in a class, a theological class. But he's starting to doze off, and he falls asleep, and Paul still talked longer. It's past midnight. Paul is still going and going and going. He's the Energizer Bunny, and being overcome by sleep, fell down from the third story and was taken up dead. This young man falls out the window, lands 3 stories down, and is dead. It's not, he might be dead, he could be dead. No, he's dead. Dead. But Paul went down and bent over him, and taking him up in his arms. One commentary said that this phrase "bent over him" is intending to imply that Paul like laid on him, similar to Elisha, and how Elisha laid down on the widow's son and revived him. I think it was widow. It was pointing to one in a miracle that happened through Elisha. I think it's Elisha, not Elijah. Sometimes I flip them around. But Paul touches this dead body. He lays down on him or leans on him and takes him up in his arms and says, "Do not be alarmed, for his life is in him." This young man was dead and he is alive. Friends, ask God. God is able. He is able to do amazing things. Now, God does not typically work that way. Can God work that way? Absolutely. We need to live and breathe and believe and act in accordance with the reality that God is able. I want to say as if he is able, but I don't like that as if, because it implies some ambiguity about whether that is actually true. Like, well, he might be able. No, God is able to do amazing things, and we need to live in that reality. We need to act in light of that reality. We need to pray in light of that reality and believe in light of that reality, trusting that God is able to do more than we can ask or imagine, infinitely more. Friends, God is able to raise people from the dead. Now, does God act that way normally? No. Is this God's normal pattern of doing things? No. Human experience, human reality will testify to us that that is not the case. But is God able? Absolutely. Friends, we need to trust God to do the incredible, but then also trust him when he doesn't do those things, because what did Jesus teach us to pray? Not my will, but yours. When Jesus was heading to the cross, he said, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup from me." Or, nah, I might have butchered that, but "Father, take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours." Like, Jesus is saying, God, I really want this thing, but I defer to your sovereign decision on whether or not we, where did my thing go? Where did it go? Sorry, friends. There it is. Where's my camera, though? There we go. Okay. We need to defer to God and his sovereign decision. So Paul bends over him, says, "Do not be alarmed, for his life is in him." And when Paul had gone up and had broken bread and eaten, he conversed with them a long while until daybreak, and so departed. They go all night. They're not just going for a little bit. They're going, they go from previous day, they eat multiple meals, and then they move on. Morning comes and they go away, and they took the youth away alive and were not a little comforted. Friends, are you comforted by the Lord's work? When the Lord shows up and answers prayers, are you comforted by them? We should be encouraged. When we see God show up, we should be encouraged and comforted. So that's why it's important that we tell others about what God has done. Like, hey, God did this awesome thing in my life, and praise be to Jesus for that. Like when Jill shared with us about how God worked in her life and relieved her of her anxiety of plane flight and her natural disposition to want to come home after just being gone for a few days when they were on the trip to Spain. Friends, praise Jesus for that work in Jill's life as he enabled her to go and serve him in a significant way. We should share these things with each other so we can be encouraged by them. Because friends, when God shows up, we can be comforted and we can be encouraged. So share the ways God is at work in your life with other believers and with non-believers, because friends, it's a testimony to him. Like, look how awesome God is. When we share a testimony of what God has done, it's a good thing. It's like when the man who was blind is brought before the Sanhedrin, and they're like, "Well, who healed you? Was it this man? Was it this guy? He couldn't. There's no possible way that he could have healed you, because there's no way that could happen." He's like, "Whether he's a prophet, I don't know. But what I do know is that I was once blind, but now I see." We don't need to know everything. We should need to tell people about God's work in our life. Now, we should endeavor to know the gospel, and we should endeavor to be able to share with people the gospel. But our testimony is a powerful tool that God can use to bring people to faith. And it's not just a testimony of what happened 15, 20 years ago, but a testimony of what God is doing lately. Friends, are you prepared to share what God is doing in your life lately? He can use it to win people to him, to point to him, to receive glory. You should share it with people. And then, but going ahead to the ship, we set sail, again, there's Luke, for Assos, intending to take Paul aboard there, for so he had arranged, intending himself to go by land. And when he had met us at Assos, we took him on board and went to Mytilene. I should have practiced that. And sailing from there, we came the following day opposite Chios. The next day, we touched at Samos, and the day after that, we went to Miletus, for Paul had decided to sail past Ephesus so that he might not have to spend time in Asia, for he was hastening to be at Jerusalem, if possible, on the day of Pentecost. So Paul knows that if he shows up in Ephesus, it's not going to be a short trip. It's not going to be a short stay. He's going to be inundated with people who want to see him. Because remember, 3 years he was in Ephesus, and all of Asia Minor had come to faith, or had heard the gospel. They didn't all come to faith, had heard the gospel as a result of his ministry and the ministry of the disciples, the believers in Ephesus, as a result of Paul's teaching and preaching and the churches that were planted. So if Paul shows up in Ephesus, they're not going to let him leave. And so Paul says, I'm going to go around, I'm going to go to Miletus, and then he arranges for the Ephesian elders to come and visit him while he's in Miletus. This will enable him to get to Jerusalem by Pentecost. So that's his goal. And so he says, instead of go to Ephesus, I'm going to go to Miletus, and he goes on from there. So friends, next week we're going to see Paul's discussion with the Ephesian elders and what he encourages them to. But just this week, I would encourage you to spend time reflecting on where's the Lord been at work in your life, and who can you share that truth with? Who can you share what testimony can you give to the work of the Lord in your life this week with another believer or with a non-believer or both? Share with them, tell them about the things that God is doing as a testimony to him and his greatness, friends, because he is able. He's able to do infinitely more than all that we can ask or think. Ask God. He is able. All right, friends, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you on Sunday. Signing off.